Well, it's great to have the family together up here, guys. Welcome. Thanks for doing all this with us today. Yeah, good to see you. So, family goes back for quite some time, Kevin.
Yes.
I tell you, so we know a little bit about how Mirage got started, and you and Pete in the early days. Maybe just walk us through when you guys came in the picture, and we'll go from there. What that looked like, because I know there's some good relationships here. You've been putting up with Steve since before Mirage days, so.
Yes. I mean, do you want me to go?
That far back?
No, you don't have to go all the way back. So.
I was born in a very small. It was a manger.
It was a manger.
It was a manger.
Yeah.
There was a glow, and then I was there.
Actually, in short, it's fun to look back, especially when we're in the state of New Hampshire, because this is very personal, very near and dear, because the Turtles were created here in New Hampshire. Peter and I had met kind of by accident. I found a magazine on the floor of a bus that had some comic books in it, cartoons in it, and I went to sell my work to that company. They stopped doing that kind of work, but they said, you should meet this guy, Peter Laird. He draws the same weird stuff you do, the superhero stuff. So back in those days, they actually gave me his address. I wrote him a letter. He wrote me back, and then we set a time to meet in this little town of Northampton. We hit it off from day one. We bonded over Jack Kirby, and then from the very first meeting, we knew we wanted to work together, so we came up with this idea of tiny robots, a robot encountering tiny creatures. He went home and penciled a page, I went home and penciled a page. Next time we got together, we swapped those pages, inked each other's work, and that was the first time we worked together. I moved back to Maine.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm learning something up here.
See? Pay attention, Lawson, for the love of God.
This is all the stuff we've lost over the years.
It's all those years in the asylum.
Yes.
Some of the stuff went away. It's like we shared rooms together in the asylum. So I moved back to Maine to work, because when you grow up in Maine, by law, you have to work from Memorial Day to Labor Day, these menial jobs, so you can make enough money to survive the long winters. I'm kidding. No, but I had a great summer job, and we could actually touch on that. Steve and I worked in the same place, the same lobster restaurant. So I moved back to Maine, and just by happenstance, Pete met a young lady who then became his wife. They moved to Dover, New Hampshire. She had a teaching job up at Dartmouth, and so they moved to Dover, which was just 20 minutes from where we were working in the Gunquit. And so that fall came, and at that time I couldn't afford college, so I'd sort of migrate a little nomadic here and there. And Pete said, well, why don't we get together and form a studio, because we worked really well together, and we'll try to sell our work together. And so I moved into a room, rented a room from them, 28 Union Street, Dover, New Hampshire. And we decided to form a studio, and we called it Mirage Studios because it was a mirage. It was our living room. And that was where, as history is quite correct, because I was there. One night when I was trying to make Pete laugh, I usually try to annoy him when he was watching some of his favorite programs, and Steve can attest to this, many years of T.J. Hooker and the A-Team and all this stuff.
Bad TV.
I just like William Shatner's hair
Well,
and
of course,
T.J.
that
Hooker's.
curly, little poodle on
Those
top of his
fake
head.
locks.
Yeah.
So late one night, I was annoying him while he was watching his shows, and I thought of, if Bruce Lee was an animal, it would be the stupidest animal he would be. Grew up in Maine, was really fond of turtles, so fast-moving martial artist, slow-moving turtle, and that was where the first sketch was done. So that's where it really started, right here in our backyard here in Dover, New Hampshire. So it's great to come back here, not only because growing up in Maine, but this is home turf, so it's a real treat to be here with you all.
When did Steve and Eric
he was
and
the
Jim
first employee.
Yeah.
I was?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
we didn't pay him.
No. I'm still waiting on the money from employee?
Yes, Pete.
I thought it was roommate. That
Let
was
me give
it.
you Pete's
Okay.
number.
Venmo with the cash. So I joined pretty quickly after they kind of formed. You had kind of come back to Maine for a little bit, and we hooked up, and was it the very first con?
Yes, yes, we had the Portsmouth Comicon was the first con. It was a Portsmouth traffic circle.
Yes, yeah.
It's the Howard Johnson.
Howard Hojo's in the traffic circle,
Howard
yeah.
goes in the
So
traffic
Kevin
circle.
gave me I have to meet Pete, and if I get approved by Pete, I could possibly be part of the team. Because Kevin hated lettering, and he was doing that.
Well, it was like because I was the worst speller in the world.
Yeah, but it didn't help when I took over.
No, we went to the same high school.
I used to tell people, make sure you write it correctly, because if not, it's going to come out incorrect. You know, so.
No, it's actually it's kind of funny because there's a couple other layers to the story that directly relate to New Hampshire, and that was my Uncle Quentin, who was the awesome uncle that gave us the $1,200 to print that very first issue, lived in Manchester, New Hampshire, so he lived right here. And he sold art supplies, so that was, we could afford to eat and buy art supplies. He worked for Charpak. And then the next layer was the Portsmouth Traffic Circle, was a very small convention put on by Ralph DiBernardo, who owns Jetpack Comics, which is in Rochester, I believe.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, so he's in Rochester. And so it's neat to see all those little things come together. But yeah, Steve and I went to elaborate further, because I talk a lot, and people usually have to, like, my wife goes, shut up.
That's good.
But Steve and I went to high school together, and Steve was hands down the funniest guy in our high school, and I still to this day, when I write Michelangelo, I think of Steve. It's sort of a combination of a little bit of Robin Williams, a little bit of Steve Lavigne, because Steve was one of those guys that if you pick a subject, you're with your mates and you're talking about a particular thing, and you drive that subject into the ground deeper and deeper and deeper, and you get to the point where there's no way we could get any lower. That was Steve's beginning. That's where he would start. And he'd have us all like rolling in the aisles. And so he was the inspiration for Michelangelo's personality for sure. And it was, as Steve said, I led at all those early Turtle issues because my handwriting, it was just one of those, by chance was, Pete's handwriting was a little messier than mine, and I was a little bit cleaner, so I couldn't spell for poop. And so, so I hand-lettered all those books, and all the misspellings of mine right up until I misspelled Michelangelo on the cover. So all those early issues of, I think by the time we got to that point, Pete was like, it's too late, just to let it go. And I want these guys to talk about their personal story too, but I want to say that Eric Talbot also was a fellow maniac. He went to the same art school that I went to. We went to. Did you go to Portland School? No, you did.
It was Vogue.
Portland Vogue.
Yeah.
Eric also went there, so we had a connection, the main connection. We got to meet at different times, and then I was really a huge fan of Eric's work, and when we were able to add more artists to the studio, because Steve started with us on lettering, and then you moved down to Connecticut when we moved down there.
Yep.
And then, so Eric came on the team, and we'll get into more on that in a sec. Then Jim Lawson, when we moved to Connecticut, at one of the shows, we saw some of your early, was it Bade Biker stories, or did that come after?
No, that was after.
That came later. It was
That
just
came
like
later.
my portfolio from art school and all that stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and that was, he was out of the team there, so, but please.
I thought you were going to tell the story that we saw a cargo flying by our window and went screaming into the backyard, and that was Jim coming over to meet with us.
The motorcycle.
It was his Honda, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And just screamed by a window that didn't have a road.
that was-
it wasn't a driveway. It just went by. And
It was like a
ended up.
Honda CRX or something.
Yeah.
This was back when Steve and Kevin were living together. Pete agreed to like meet me with you guys at your apartment. So I went over there with I'd gone to art school. I have a bachelor's in illustration, and you guys were all hanging out. What were you doing? Shooting each other with darts or something like that?
Disc guns, probably
or
disc gun, having a disc
running
gun
around-
war, probably.
Yeah,
That sounds about right. Yeah.
It was insane.
We
It was
didn't have
not-
boxes on our head, did we?
Possibly. I
Okay.
think
It's
you did.
nothing juvenile, nothing juvenile at all.
Very
Oh my God.
professional.
Yeah. Constantly. I mean, that's what we were.
No, I don't know if
Totally
you was like,
professional.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny because when we had a studio at some point, because when Mirage Studios started growing, each of the artists that came on board were at different opportunities as the company was growing. We were publishing new stuff like Jim's project, Bade Biker, was one that we brought, and we self-published. Mike Dooney did Gizmo, Ryan Brown, and then as the Turtles grow, we ended up we needed the help because we had a whole army of really talented guys working within the company, doing their own stuff and their own stuff, stories and creations within the company. But as the company started growing, we had this opportunity where it was whether it be the creation of the Archie comic books, licensing for different products, which these guys have just done a ton of. I mean, Jim Lawson doing coloring books to, Steve Lavigne coloring everything on the planet. But it was we had this great studio where everybody had this sort of carved out their little turf, and it was in this large room, and inevitably at some point we had these little guns. They were called disc guns, and they shot these little plastic discs. So sometime somebody would get bored, and then somebody would pull out a gun and start shooting at somebody else, and pretty soon it was duck and cover, and everybody's like bang, 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 bang. So
Yeah, those are the airsoft guns. Those were even more dangerous than the
graduated up to like full airsoft.
Yeah, well, usually those started with something whizzing by your head and ruining a piece of art or a poster on the wall.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then tables got flipped over. People got shot in places they shouldn't be getting shot.
Flamethrowers came out.
Yeah, I think I shot Eric. He was smiling. I think I shot him in the mouth. That was me.
I remember my studio desk. We had these big desks.
The doors.
You start making those?
Yeah, remember the doors? The
I had a
holocore
big,
doors?
giant
Yeah.
desk, and we had these massive windows. And I think at one point I took one of the screens and attached it to the front of my desk because, you know, you'd be working and all of a sudden the guns would start shooting. You'd be shot, so you could just kind of hunch down.
And I had one of those wire screeners for pasta.
Oh, you
and I put some rubber bands on. I put it over my face so that if I got shot in the face, I would be protected.
Wow, I never protected myself.
that went on.
You just
Well,
took it right in the full face, naked face.
Oh, yeah.
We were just hoping for headshots because then it
Sure.
wouldn't hurt. So,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, well, exactly. Well, when someone smiles.
That's why I never smiled. I learned those.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny because you think, you know, back in the early days when we first started and the Turtles really started growing in a big way, and it was as much a surprise to Pete and I, going back to the perspective that, you know, not only did we do the first issue and it sold, and it's all your fault. Thank you, thank you. But when those first comics started selling, and which was a wonderful dream come true for us, because then we were following in the footsteps of our inspirations, the Jack Kirby's and the people that, you know, we dreamed about being cartoonists. And then we started drawing comics full time around issue 2 in 1985. But then as the company grew into this whole licensing with the cartoons and the licensing and the toys and all that stuff, it was a time when I think people from the outside looking in were thinking we were just sort of sitting around the pool all day drinking martinis and Scrooge McDuck, you know, diving into snacks of money. That came later, of course.
Right. I was
No,
gonna
I
say,
didn't.
we did do that.
I didn't. But no, it was a time that we were very lucky in that because Peter and I created and owned the Turtles and had full control. Every single item you saw with a turtle on it, whether it be something that Steve did, again from toy designs to coloring Archie books, or coloring some of the original first comics books, to Eric inking just, besides his own stories, inking just stacks and stacks and mounds of work, either from some of the City at War stuff to what Jim was doing, and it was everything from coloring books to everything. But we had this company, and oftentimes we were working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to keep up with this, because if you have the control and you want the control, and it was of quality control, having our in-house guys work on it, we get the work exactly the way we wanted. So when you have a gunfight start in the studio, it's just tension relief.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, we'd already been drawing for 4, 5, 6 hours, so
I'm
it
not
was
sure
great
that
too.
that's ever probably happened again or before that you guys had the foresight to keep that much control over the property. Not that you could see where it was going to end up, but at the same time keeping that control and keeping a group together and being a part of that, because that stuff gets farmed out quickly in this kind of a world.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of cool. It's kind of really, really neat.
We were lucky, and we didn't we didn't know how lucky we were at the time, but it was something that was important to us to sort of keep that control, and also because we were quite literally friends first, and then as the business grew and the whole thing evolved together, it was just an opportunity again to I learned how to draw on the Turtles. I learned how to, when Pete and I went into, the world of animation or the toys and the things like that, we knew nothing about it, and so it was a real education for us. And so when it was, we saw the possibility, like a lot of people don't know, for example, like the Archie comic books, those were all prepared and all done within Mirage Studios by our team of writers and artists and stuff, doing the comics the way we wanted to see them done. One of the coolest parts of the studio to me was, and you guys got to tell me your favorite toys you designed, is that we also worked on the toy design. So we had this toy group, sort of part of the company, where we would actually come up with a lot of different toy characters that were then considered for and put into, in some cases, the animated show and done as toys.
And Carl
so,
would come with his wish lists.
Yeah.
Every year with a
That's-
list of what he wanted us to mutate.
yeah.
You know, like, mutate these this year. You know, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was very
What did you? How many of? What's? Do you have a favorite one that you worked on? One of the toys back in the day? Yeah.
I guess Sergeant Bananas. I'll go with that one. Yeah.
Sergeant Bananas.
Yeah. Yeah.
You did a
I
bunch.
just
He
did
did tattoo.
Tattoo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tattoo. Jim.
And it was, I guess, Rat King.
Rat
was
King.
the only one.
Rat King, yeah.
Yeah.
Rat King, and then Rat King was from the earliest
He's
Tales.
from
issues,
Tales.
and
Yeah.
that was-
The Eye Monster.
No, it's funny. We were before we came up through it. We were lucky enough. I went through Northampton, which is always an excuse to get back in the old stomping grounds there. Certainly Massachusetts. We got to see Dan Berger, who's another one of the original team, and he did Murdude.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we adore Dan, and Dan is a living embodiment of Eeyore. So it's sort of like, and so I said, Murdude, and he goes, Murdude, adored by dozens.
Yeah. Adored by dozens. That sounds like Dan. Yeah. Why would anyone want to see me?
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun, and that was great to go through that experience, because I felt like a lot of times for Pete and I, it went from 90% of our time drawing and creating in those in that situation, and then when we had to manage and work oversee the property, it was a flip. So we were doing less creative time, certainly passing pages back and forth like we used to. We were doing a lot of business side of it, but it was also, there was creative parts like reading animation scripts or the toy designs and those kind of things. But it was also very lucky that we had such an incredible group of guys. And I felt like you hear these stories of like the Beatles back in the day, and not that saying we were the Beatles, but the idea that they went through it together, and so we had a sort of support group. So it's like when it was just madness of working all the time and all this stuff spinning in different directions and people pulling in different billion directions. We had the studio. We'd go get a slice of pizza together.
Yeah, we worked in a big like open
Factory
warehouse.
space, yeah.
Yeah, studio. So we kind of saw each other every day for a while
Yeah.
until things started ramping up on your end and like
See
you're
less
saying,
of
like,
you. Yeah.
What's that?
We'd see less of him and Pete.
Yeah.
And those.
Yeah, but we did see each other every day for a long, long time. And we would eat at the same lunch place downtown every day at the same time.
And we'd
go
play
for beers every day.
Play
Same
basketball for
Buffalo.
lunch to see who was
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
pay for lunch, that type of stuff.
Yeah, we did stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
actually a lot of fun.
It was a dream, really. I mean, nobody gets that. Nobody gets to stay together in a space. I mean, you hear their studio. Remember, that always seemed like that's impossible. Nobody does it, but we really got to do it. I mean, it's really.
It's like something you touched on earlier is like, I know for me, I had no clue what I was doing. I was like, I was learning. I'm not even sure I was a massive comic fan. I liked heavy metal, which is kind of how we hooked up and ended up getting along. But feeding off each other, drawing together every day. We kind of learned from each other and taught each other.
Well, like you said, even in the studio, I always say, like, there was times where you go over to somebody else's table and you're looking at their drawing upside down and asking what they're working on, and all of a sudden you get an idea from that's not at all what they're drawing, but you're looking at it and you had something in your head. It was just a great creative space. It was a lot of fun. Dangerous at times, but a lot of fun.
We jammed on stuff too. That's the
Yeah,
other thing. It's
yeah.
like seeing Kevin ink, or Jim ink Kevin, or Kevin ink, whatever. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It was.
We feed off each other.
Yeah, there was no school certainly for on the comic book side. I mean, there was the Kubert school. It just kind of started and evolved at that point. But everything that we did, it was self-taught. And I'm 60 now, and I'm still learning stuff. But it is sort of that.
I got a shiver again. Oh yeah.
But it was a lot of camaraderie.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Like you said, I felt like, I didn't go to art school, so I felt like I was getting paid to get an art degree, and we had a way of like, if somebody's work, how do you do that? And everybody shared, so it was a great space.
What's funny is like this is an interesting. Hopefully it's not too technical, because it's not really. But it's just funny when you think like These days, if you're coloring a comic or licensed art and things like, a lot of times you're doing it digitally. It's scanned in the computer and everything's digital. But in the earliest days, they had this coloring process for comics. It was called
Blue lines.
Blue lines.
You know about
It's-
blue lines.
I've done a few of those.
Well, that was, I think, so we had never seen this process, and because all the early Turtle comics were black and white. So to do blue lines back in those days, to create color comic books back in those days, especially the ones that you could have, it was less technical in that, the calling out the Pantone colors, but you could actually do more rendering on it and do a more
It's full
beautiful
painted
paint.
as opposed to drop-in color.
So this is what you had to do. You would take a piece of the art, it would be scanned on clear acetate, and then they would put it on top of a heavier piece of board, and then that was treated with a chemical, and then expose it to light. And so when you then completed the process and you lifted this piece of acetate up, you'd see the black and white drawing in blue on that piece. So now to color it, that's how you had to color it. You
Yeah.
literally had to paint and keep
Put
putting
it
the
back
thing.
down and flip and put it back.
You could see the image on the paper, but it was in blue. So as soon as you started putting color down, that went away.
Right.
So you're like, am I at the edge of this line?
Yeah, am I still in the line there? You
And then,
got good at it.
At the same time, you're using like a wet media, and you're putting a piece of acetate on it, and you pick it up. And
Michelle's got one back there. There we have an example.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pass it around.
Yeah, but please share that with everybody.
We have.
And that's a
we
lot
didn't know
of
we brought props. Thank you, Michelle. That's awesome.
So it would start out with duo shade, right, and then go through it. So there's just so many layers to that.
Well, that was the weird thing. Like, I don't know how or why you and Pete ever thought to make color, black and white Xeroxes before you toned the pages even.
It was scared.
yeah.
No, we actually, because again, not to get too technical, but this, when we were actually doing the black and white comic, Pete had experienced this. They used to use it for newspaper illustrations, and back in the old days of Mad Magazine, where you would do the black and white line work, and then they had this process called duo shade, which is it was a printed pattern or design on the paper. So you draw on it like you would any piece of paper. Then you had two chemicals, and the one chemical you use it with a brush, and it would evolve as you used it like you would watercolor. So one chemical would develop the lines going in one direction, and once you let it dry, then the next chemical would lines going in the next direction. But then when you photocopied it for reproduction, you'd have not just your black and your white, but two shades of gray, and it was already in a process that could be scanned for printing. And so we were so scared that we were going to mess it up. So when we drew it in black and white, we photocopied everything so we could preserve it in case we really destroyed it. And like,
Now that makes perfect sense. I can see that, but they could do that with it. And the toner, remember the dark tone was like
Stinky.
liquid sulfur. Like and if you ever had to put it in an airbrush, which occasionally we did, the
Way too
studio
much.
smelled like rotten eggs for the whole rest of the day. It's like
Yeah.
that was the worst. But
Even when you use, I was just toning something, Jim and I just did a duo shade piece, and it was a lot of fun going back to it, but even when you're toning with the dark tone, it's like.
yeah, it's got a little stink to it.
It's stink. Yeah.
And it would eat the brushes, like you had to, your brushes would just slowly disintegrate as you use them.
I think they said that
Did nothing to your
discovered it's
lungs breathing
toxic.
it in,
They-
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are like, you use duo shade? That stuff's toxic. We used to.
I had my filter, I had my
Oh
airbrush
yeah,
filter.
everybody had their filters. Yeah, when we were airbrushing.
We would do, we used Aeropaques a lot, which is like a liquid liquid acrylic color.
Mm.
And we would airbrush that stuff. And
Oh.
for like days.
You would sneeze
blue
rainbows.
snot.
Sneeze rainbows.
So if you guys want to see a really cool piece, stop by Eric and Jim's booth. They did an awesome piece on duo shade. Got Raph and a Triceraton, some action going on with that.
Man, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Where did this secret duo shade come from? Because I heard rumors there was no duo shade left on the planet.
So the studio building that we were, oh God, we must have been in there for almost 30 years. I guess the building on Market Street just recently got sold. So as of last February, now we're out of the old Mirage Studio building, which, the building's still there down in Northampton, but I'm working back home now, as is Mike Dooney, probably my most regular studio buddy up until that point. And so, yeah. Where was I going with this?
You were telling us where you got the secret
same
duo
stash.
shade.
Oh
you
yeah,
sent it
so
to
when
us.
the studio got sold,
The duo shade fairy would come by every night.
Is there a ball?
It was really fun.
Pete had a studio there, and from what I understand from Mike Dooney, he's the finder of the lost cache of duo shades, which is like, it's like the grail. You
Yeah.
slide the couch away, and there's like some on the floor underneath it or something. It's glowing and stuff like that.
Wow.
Because you can't find this stuff. It's the stuff that exists now is probably 20 years old.
At least, yeah.
And Dooney found some duo shade, I think, in Pete's office, and
This sheet that we just used came from that stash.
yeah, I had none. Or maybe I had like little tiny bits, but it's so precious. You save everything you can because you never know. You could do a little drawing on it, and the thing is now the chemicals, the little bottle of chemicals, are also 20 years old, and those tend to dry out. So
The bottles used to come with metal lids, and when we ordered that last batch, we got bottles with plastic lids, but the original bottles with the metal lids, you wouldn't even use it. You'd go to take a box out and you'd pull it out and it would be just rusted.
Well, there were hundreds of those little white boxes all over the studio. I mean, because they gave you where every sheet you got a thing of the.
but rabbit urine does work
Right.
as a dark chemical.
I remember Bunny Pea is dark. Yeah. it's-
Ryan Brown used to have a rabbit that peed on one of the pages at one point.
And we discovered that rabbit pee was dark toned.
So we had to keep that rabbit.
So we just
There's your
squeezed
secret
Bunny over it
for you.
every once in a while.
I thought it was funny, the white boxes, I was using it, and I remember we used to take the white boxes and tear it off. You'd have the two toners in, you had a brush holder. you'd
Yeah,
take
everything
your
was right there.
devil.
Yeah, right in there. Yeah.
No, it's funny. It's like, let's make fun of Pete because we can. No, it was. No, and I mean that in the kindest, most loving
Yes.
sense, because he was like, we all love and adore Pete to this very minute. In fact, I always say that to this day, every time I write Donatello, I think of Pete, because Pete was the first one to bring into the studio. What was that thing? A computer.
Magic box.
And I was like, oh, these things are never going to go anywhere. It was like Commodore 64. and
You
then
were
something
you
else.
were right, which is
But we used to tease him. Remember, we'd go to lunch, right? And Pete was the first guy. Again, anything gadgetry, he had a Casio calculator watch.
that's right.
And so we were splitting up the lunch tab. He would like calculate. It was like Jethro from Beverly Hillbillies. His shirt was pulled all the way up here, so you could see his Casio calculator
like the
watch.
first
and-
cell phone, I think.
Right,
I ever
yeah.
saw. It was like
Yeah.
the size of a brick.
Yeah, he had a brick,
We were
yeah.
all like,
I think he had the first iPhone too, because I remember you just touched the screen. Yeah, tech boy.
So it's funny. So we had this, and it takes me back to Pete had this organized this really delicate organizational system called None, and so back in the day, like even when we were working on stuff back in the earliest Mirage Studios on 28 Union Street, and I would like give him some stuff, like hey, go over this, and he'd like pick it up and go okay, and he'd set it on the stack, and eventually that stack would get too high and fall over onto the floor, and he'd go. Oh, okay. But now he's got room to stack more stuff. So the fact that you would find Duo Shade in his office space after cleaning it out is no surprise at all. It's like it could be like other things living there. And, the what's that in the cartoon we made, the pizza monster?
Right.
we were checking his couch cushions for change and stuff like that.
Loose $100 bills. I'm thinking change.
Casio watches.
Yeah, Casio watches. I think I inherited a set of almost brand new Doc Martens he brought to me from the office. I'm like, brand new full set of Doc Martens.
A lot of the old stuff was colored with Doc Martens, right?
Yeah. I still.
Is there any red bandanas left at this
No.
point, though?
You know what fades
Yeah.
too is purple. The purple is like
Purple fades incredibly, quick, yeah.
And my dad, years ago, I gave my dad the cover of Turtles issue 7. It's like all the Triceratons in the purple uniform. It's like they're all the purple's completely.
Yeah.
different. It's like,
I think I discovered that on Ninja Nutcase the purple dropped completely out of the thing. And I'm like, I guess I could pull it out of the frame
The
and put
red
purple.
was like really good. It
Yeah.
was really good stuff to use, but a lot of the old Mirage stuff probably is going to suffer from that because Duoshade is notorious for being
Oh, it leaks through.
unstable.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It blows up.
If you know anything about it, it's like
Explosive.
if you stack it up and you go through it years later, you have whatever's on the front of this page is burned into the page above it and above it and above it. So
Yeah. So don't stack your Duoshade.
Yeah, I think looking back to especially the team of guys that we had and the work that we did, one of the things that still continues to impress me today is like how much work we actually did, how much work we accomplished, whether it be the original Mirage Studios series, just the, even towards the end of the original run, which I call Turtles 1 through 11, plus the 4 one-shots featuring each individual turtle, that a lot of the guys were pitching in on some of those issues towards the end, besides Steve lettering them. But then, that went on to the Tales of the Turtles, which we ran parallel to that series, which was all original stories and ideas from Ryan Brown and Mike Dooney and Eric and Jim and Steve were all writing and doing stuff to that then expanded into the larger run as issues that led up to issue 48, which we started The City at War, that ran through issue 62, which was the end of the first, what we call volume 1. But then within that same time period, the same team of guys did 73 issues of the Archie series. And then, you get past that. This is between all the licensing art and all the stuff you're doing, but then when you do volume 2, which is the work that you guys started with Pete, when Pete was just doing that series. But that was, again, it was, Jim, were you writing, co-writing with Pete, and then penciling, and then Eric was inking?
Yeah.
And that's how that...
How many did we do in volume 4? Volume 4 was like 32 issues?
32 issues, yeah, it was,
And
32
then all
issues.
the secondary Tales books, when those came out.
Right.
Yeah.
You got other people to work on that stuff. Though,
Yeah.
but-
Yeah. No, it's just, it's great to look back on all that.
Jones and-
history.
Yeah, did some of those. Yeah.
But for a long time, we all worked together, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
It was a really,
Yep.
really cool experience.
Something.
And we also had the studio together. We had to share music, so we were in there every day.
Yeah.
And it got interesting.
There was some good music being.
Yeah, we kind of like had a middle ground, like
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is
REM. And
Right. Yeah. It wouldn't offend anybody. It did unoffensive as we called it music.
yeah, it was like
Fun.
Ryan and I were like
Yeah, metal.
Metallica.
Anything.
every
Well,
day.
Brian was speed, death, any type of metal. I
Yeah.
believe was Ryan, right? Yeah.
This is the
Jacked
part
up
I
on
think
Mountain
you
Dew.
guys are remembering more fondly than you did. I remember some serious music fights.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
means you
I'm
get the guns.
teasing you.
Yeah, they were.
I know we're gonna be shut off. We gotta all head out at 3, right? This wraps at 3.
Yeah, just a little. So if you want to take some questions, you guys good with that? Yeah. So if you all, we'll line up at the microphone in the middle. We got time for maybe 5 or 6 questions. If you want to grab to the microphone, we'll ask that you ask just one question for right now, and we'll jump into that. Appreciate it. All right, we'll start out. Brian, go right ahead.
So this might be for Kevin. I've been wondering this for a while. The turtles you see on the cartoon, who designed them?
The Turtles on the cartoon.
Yeah.
It was in the earliest days of the development of those. It was mainly done by the Fred Wolf, a couple of animators, designers at Fred Wolf.
Okay.
At that time, it was called Murakami Wolf Animation Studio, and it was done in cooperation, with the toy company, because we would go out and we'd have to try to solve 2 things at once. One was design characters that you could actually make as toys, which is, again, affordable toys for playmates, but also something that you could animate and be able to tell them apart and animate a world and environment that would be within reasonable budgets.
Sure.
But again, being lucky enough to Pete and I having control over all of that, through that early development, we were able to say yes to things we like, no to the things we like, and we're I'd say hands-on, but also contributed. For example, the different colored bandanas. That was one of the first conversations we had early on. Was like, how do you tell them apart? And, Pete and I were like, weapons, duh. And they said, well, we understand that. Duh. No, they said we understand that, but how can we tell them apart more easily recognizable on the TV screen? And Pete had this great idea to do different colored bandanas, and it was people, it was with actually thought. Orange is kind of a silly color, thus Michelangelo. Donatello, the purple, is kind of a more of a peaceful monk, bow staff sort of feel. Blue is the sort of regal samurai. Leonardo is the leader, and Ralph is our original red. Because when I did the first color cover for the Turtles, it was issue 5. We went from the oversized to the smaller comic book size, and I did that first painting. I painted with all red bandanas. Again, the interior is black and white, so we knew who they were. And so it was that. I always still think that the initials on the belts was one step too far, but you know, like, wait, I'm Mike. No shit.
Oh look,
I'm Leo.
I'm the M1.
But so a lot of the design work, and even for some of the original bad guy characters and things. So we had our 4 turtles, and then Shredder. The foot evolved out of the original concept design as the foot, but we couldn't go around, you know, slaughtering humans on Saturday morning cartoons, so they made all the foot robots. And then some of the characters like Bebop and Rocksteady evolved out of a lot of development we did, which actually I think, Jim, you illustrated a ton of the role-playing game books. Pete and I did the first ones, but like some of Bebop and Rocksteady started there, and then we did, which is still cool. How many of those have you signed this weekend? Role-playing games. I signed a ton of them, and I love seeing those.
I maybe signed 5. Something
Really?
Like that. Yep.
Well, that's, you know, the ledge, I guess.
You got one, you got to
Right.
go see Jim.
He doesn't have the shirt. He doesn't have the shirt.
Well, they probably would have got over to have you sign it, but they were stuck in my line.
No, once
Thank
you,
you, guys.
once you stepped away, they all came over.
Yeah, it's just- finally, he's gone.
Yeah. Kevin must be gone because we've got lines.
First you, Eastman. But anyways, a long way around of saying it was fun, and then just to wrap up on the design part, we were very lucky to work with those, because it was only designed as 5 episodes in the earliest days, and David Wise and Patty Howarth adapted and created a lot of the foundation of those first animated episodes, which are great.
All right, awesome. We've got time for 3 more questions. Yes, sir.
Unless
Brian Manel.
I answer. No.
So, what have you guys listened to any music while you guys worked? Like any particular groups or kinds of music that you've listened to as you worked on your projects? And what kind of music or music groups do you think the characters would listen to?
Oh.
Mhm.
I think
Start
we
with
all
Jim?
like did different things. I think whatever we did, like if I drew them, I think they'd be listening to like Metallica and Slayer
Right.
and stuff. But Pete would have them listening to like the Roaches and
Right. Yeah.
Roaches.
Exactly.
the next tune would be, I don't know.
You know, it's funny you say that, and there are certain bands that when I hear them, like take me right back to the studio.
The
Like
Gurus.
the Bodines, the
Bodines,
Gurus,
yeah.
Texas. Do you remember? Like
Oh, yeah.
we would listen to
Yeah.
Texas.
Robbie Robertson.
Treat her right on the
Treat her
end.
right,
And
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah.
I
I
forgot
Del
all
Fuego.
about
Guys,
that.
The Fuegos.
I've heard of these
Fuegos,
guys,
yeah.
Del Fuegos,
Yeah,
yeah.
They're like, oh, okay, old guys, stop talking about
Yeah.
that.
Whoa. No, they're all like, what are those? Are those the bands?
Oh, Blue Eye.
Yeah. Oh, I love the old blue eyes.
There's something funny. I always thought like Casey Jones was like the Avatar character. Like when I draw him, I'd have a sense of
I
what
know
he
you
was.
said that, yeah.
Like if you drew him, it was like said like when Pete drew, everybody would kind of put their own spin on like
On
Casey's
Casey.
like what he was all about.
Yeah.
You know, he was just like it was kind of funny.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah,
you look back.
Casey was a funny, quick digression, it was a funny evolution as I wanted to do this, you know, back in those days they had this, so many vigilantes, and there was always this horrific, you know, backstory from murdering their whole planet to their village, you know, there was just, it was really deep, and I just wanted to have a guy that became a vigilante because he watched too much bad TV, which was inspired
He had,
by,
like,
you know,
like
some of...
tons of TVs in his apartment. Though.
Yeah, like the first episode of the first Casey Raphael thing, he's watching 3 TVs at the
Right.
same time.
All
it's-
different cop shows.
So I think I had him with baseball bats at first, and I was like calling him Bat Boy or something. And then Pete had the genius idea, of course, and he said, "Why don't we give him a golf bag and all kinds of weapons?" And so that was a real treat.
It's funny, in the early ones too, he had the umbrellas.
Yeah.
I always thought that was kind of funny.
It's like they're like Penguin, you know. Like,
Yeah, he had an umbrella, and yeah, it was in his bag without the cloth part. It was just the metal part of the umbrella.
But it was so that was Casey was created in that first issue, came out in '85, and '86 a year later they did a movie called Big Trouble in Little China, which I know we were all fans of. And once Big Trouble in Little China came out, to this day I still think when I write Casey, I always think of what would Jack Burton do. So I always kind of like model that.
Pretty much.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so but yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm wondering if each of you have your own favorite turtle that you've drawn throughout the times. Like, who did you like? Each of the 4 turtles are pretty different, and they're all in fighting styles, just their own personality that you see through their art. But did you have any that you specifically like to draw a little bit more than the other 3?
That was always Raphael. I don't know. I always liked drawing him.
Well, I think like everybody, I think Leo is fun to draw because he usually has two swords, you know, so you can kind of do cool things with him. Donnie's probably the hardest because he's just got a big stick.
I hated drawing nunchucks, so I hated drawing Michelangelo.
Well, you changed the nunchucks were changed to have chain or cord.
Yeah,
You know, and then when they were cord, it was easy.
Now I actually like drawing the chain.
I like doing the chain, yeah.
No, and I think as an artist, we all probably appropriately profess to stealing everything from everywhere. I was probably, but it was I remember Daredevil when he had Frank Miller did the cane that came apart, and they would have these ropes. You know, it would like would come apart, and you could sort of
swing and
fling it mysteriously, and it would hook onto some building, and he could, you know, and I always like because it had a cord, so I always thought like, you know, for Michelangelo, it was like, and because you could have it go from different lengths, and the chains were a pain in the butt to draw. So it was like when you had the cord, you could sort of like
you had to count the links on each nunchuck. It's like, okay, 1, 2, I got 6 there and 4 over here. Oh,
yeah, if you did the cord, you're like.
You got to add a chain link in there somehow.
No, but yeah, like I think I'd lean towards Raphael only because, and that was the evolution. You know, when the creation of the Raphael one shot was the first of the micro series, and we did that book because it was a lot of mini series were being done, introduced at that time, 4-issue mini series, and Pete and I came up with this, we said, well, let's do a 1-issue micro series featuring each of the turtles, and Raphael was always kind of a raging character. And I always thought if he met somebody that was crazier than him, would he sort of balance out? But then we ended up creating, you know, these characters that were like 2 oddball cousins or brothers that when they weren't beating up bad guys, they were beating up each other. But then once we had that team, it was always great to draw Raphael and Casey doing something crazy.
Did the Casey Raph thing follow through to the shows that much? I kind of don't know.
Well, Casey came. Remember when Casey came to the show? They gave it that weird Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. What are you doing here, Turtle?
Go ahead, make my day.
Yeah, exactly. Go back to the sewer.
I think
that relationship that they had, because you did a lot of really cool stuff with them. I was looking at some of the old books today, like Fun with Guns.
Yeah.
There's some like really good Casey Raph
The
stuff.
bullet-absorbing suit. Get back here.
I love
That was a genius
Science of
idea.
comic books.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we got one last
How
question.
did you guys create Krang?
Krang.
Krang came from these characters that Kevin and Pete created called Utroms that were really cool little like tentacle brain guys. And I think Murakami must have just you got what am I talking about?
Yeah, you know.
No, that's it. No,
They were already like in the stomach of the robots there, right?
Yeah.
And,
yeah, it was like, you know, and we're all huge fan of Pete's ability to draw machinery and robots that look like they work, and I think they really because the Utroms was definitely a complete, you know, Pete Laird brainchild, in that he came up with almost like the exoskeleton idea, so we could draw these robots, which I try to make something easier to draw. I mean, it was, you know, to make them work panel to panel. Yeah. So it was like these aliens trapped on Earth and been there for a period of time. And this part of it was the evolution of the ooze, because we wanted to come up with something that was a little bit more grounded in that, you know, most superhero comics, you know, like Spider-Man gets bit by a radioactive spider, now he's Spider-Man, or the Fantastic Four get exposed to gamma rays, and now they, you know. And so we just had ooze. They fell into this ooze in a sewer, and so we dug a little bit deeper and sort of came up with this alien origin, and that was the creation of the Utrom characters. But it was Pete's ability to come up and design these really cool robots, and with the little fleshy-headed mutants stuck in there.
That is great that he put it in the stomach.
I know.
That's very Pete.
Yeah.
So, and that was, again, you know, so many things that were sort of plucked from the early inspirations of the comics or the role-playing games. They just took that, the animation studio took that and brought it down to just one character, Krang.
And simplified the robot into like some giant
Uniroyal man.
He
looked like the Uniroyal man.
It did. It was like crossing a Uniroyal and a Michelin Man, or
I remember.
I was like, what?
the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Well, and at the time there was a crap load of cool, tech suits, models and stuff we were all digging, and all of a sudden we get this Uniroyal man with the pink thing in his stomach. I was like, what?
Because it's easy to draw.
With those sunglasses and the thing on his head.
know, right?
The magnet? I'm thinking a magnet?
It's a tuning fork.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God.
Well, that's all. Well, thank y'all so much for sharing all the details behind that. Oh, we got one more question. All right, we'll take one more real quick.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, why pizza? Like, were they ever obsessed with tacos? Did they go for Chinese food? Like,
Why not pizza?
what was the thing with pizza?
When we weren't at the gym working out,
Which was constant.
we were hanging around the pizza pile.
I was thinking it was instead of ramen noodles, we get a pizza occasion.
Another salad? No.
Oh, never again. No more salads. Let's
So I
have
was
pizza.
in Florence the other day at Pizza Factory, which I think we had a lot of pizza. It's closing.
Oh, that's.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah.
No, but it was, I think
They're in the
growing up,
cottage kitchen.
it was a kind of a teenage, it's a teenager thing we never lost, was eating pizza. And I was out, I worked at Louis Variety in Westbrook, so after school, I worked at the pizza place.
So
And
that
so,
kind of did start in the comics, right? The whole pizza thing.
I
I was trying to remember whether the toy company was like, we need something funny
To make 'em
goofy,
teenage.
that
What do
no one
teenagers
had.
do?
Turtles
Why
like
they eat pizza?
There was a bit of it in the comics, but it was really solidified in the cartoon show. That was
Solidified,
really
it was beaten over the head with it. And
that, and because we, even like some of the catchphrases like Cowabunga or Gungala Gungala, because it was like Gungala Gungala was one of those Tarzan. Gungala Gungala.
Let's get to the end.
It depends which part of Maine you're
listen,
from.
wasn't it misspelled?
I always like side as good.
Well, how do you pronounce gobbledygook? It's like, no, that was one of the. No, no, I love, growing up as a kid and you watch those Tarzan movies, and he would also, he'd talk to he'd see the lion and he'd go, Gungala Gungala, and it would make him a cappuccino or something. It was so, whatever he did, it's like, Gungala Gungala, and the elephant would push over the tree.
Right, yeah.
Good boy. And then Cowabunga came from, I remember watching on Saturday morning, it was like one of those matinees on a Saturday, those beach blanket bingo movies. And when you grew up where we grew up, that was like a whole other planet. So like, hang 10, dude, Cowabunga.
What are they saying?
Where's all the snow?
There's not an A up in here at all.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take one last question.
Last
to wrap
question.
up.
Do you guys what's your opinion on Bebop and Rocksteady? Which one do you guys like more?
There are a couple, right?
Yep.
Aren't they married, Mr.?
What's our opinion on Bebop and Rocksteady?
Who do you like
Bebop
better?
is cooler, I think, right?
You do?
Don't you think?
Which version?
He's funner to draw. I always
Yeah,
have a hard
yeah.
time with Rocksteady, yeah.
I get them mixed up, so I. Which one's
Bebop Boar.
Which one's the wrestler
Bebop
guy?
the Boar.
One's based on a wrestler.
Right.
With the glasses or something.
They-
No,
I think they
very
came
quiet.
later.
There was a wrestler that played him.
Yep.
What was that wrestler that like? What is it?
Seamus played him in the
Yeah.
in the movie. Yeah.
Seamus played
There
him in
was
the
a
movie.
wrestler he was based
That had the glasses like
on. Yeah, the
that.
guy. Oh yeah,
Oh, Macho Man.
Macho Man, first man.
I always,
Step into a Slim Jim.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I always assumed that's where that guy came from. But
I don't think so.
this is all new that it came out of the role-playing books to me.
Yeah, I remember the old drawings that were from that, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, it was like, because a lot of that stuff, I think, because they were in the first 5 episodes, and what was great about is again, they were testing it, see if they even wanted to make any more, or actually more importantly, because even we went into those animation episodes thinking like, this has worked as a comic book, and even then it was, barely, it was working as a comic book, we just couldn't see it making the jump to something that kids would want to watch. So they just did the 5-part episodes, which was like the hot rodding teenagers from Dimension X, which was the Neutrinos and Bebop and Rocksteady were introduced,
And
and
they played
Krang.
them quite a few times,
And-
if I remember.
Because they didn't have
Yeah, I know, they were waiting for the new episodes.
And you guys know who wrote the theme song? Have you heard this one before? You know who wrote the theme song? Yeah, Chuck Lorre, from 2.5 Men. Big
Yeah,
Bang
exactly.
Theory. Yeah.
Ask us. No, we don't know. Charlie Sheen, I thought he was on the show.
Yeah.
2.5 Men. He played on the piano.
Charlie Waffles.
Yeah.
But no, it's funny. We actually, many years later, I got to meet Chuck Lorre at an event, and he was very nice. So I asked him for money, and no, he was very nice, and he came over and he just said he's just starting out. He was writing jingles for commercials and stuff, and it was a big break for him writing a theme show. a theme for a cartoon show, and he said his daughter at the time, when the Turtles became a hit, was like, gave his daughter bragging rights. It's like my dad wrote the theme song to the Ninja Turtles. So it was, so nice guy. It was it's good. We actually, and I wish because people asked about the voices that were originally chosen for the first series, which were spot on, and we did get audition tapes, but we had, and I would love to find those original samples of proposed theme songs, because
That's what I was gonna say. I remember like Kaseska, it was like a cowboy theme.
I was gonna say it was like Rawhide.
But it was like,
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeehaw!
So we need a Mirage playlist that's got
gotta go.
all the
Right,
studio
all the-
music and all that good stuff. We hate to let them run. They've got to jump and
Yeah.
get back to booths. Kevin, you've got photo op coming
We got
up,
photo
right?
ops, and then
Stop by the booths over there. Jim and Steve have a cover for 132 that they've done that's available inside. Be sure to check that out. And then Eric and Jim have an awesome print from Duo Shade that's over there. So how about a big round of applause for these guys?
Okay.
Thank y'all for all that you've done. Appreciate y'all.